third round. I'm going back to Mr. Perkins again for 5 minutes, please, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to begin by sort of a follow-up to my previous questions on this issue of transparency, because you say when it gets, the Green Slush Fund gets merged over into IRAP with the governance structure there, that somehow it'll be subject to all the usual FAA, and I presume that means like access to information. But when I go to the SDTC website, you can print off great detail on every single investment they've made going back to 2001, both active and inactive, when it was given, how much was given, who the proponents were, by date. But no such thing exists for IRAP on a public disclosure that I can see. So it looks to me like by folding this in with IRAP, there will actually be less public transparency and accountability to the Green Slush Fund than more. So will you pledge that everything that SDTC does in its new incarnation under your leadership and the leadership of the Minister of Industry will have at least this? It didn't stop the corruption of $390 million of $800 million going to conflicted parties, but at least we could figure it out and parliamentarians could see it. But I don't see that NRC operates that way.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to follow up with the committee to provide the links to all the proactive disclosure that takes place on the investments we make under NRC IRAP. And I think that would hopefully resolve the member's question as to where you can find the information, because it's important. It's a matter of policy that is made public. And I would say similarly, it's equally important for us people to know who we invest in and how much and the names of the companies, so Canadians can look at that information. And it's something we've done, we do, and we will continue to do, and that will apply, of course, to any funding under any measures for sustainable development technology that we'll be offering under NRC IRAP. But I'd like to provide that link to the committee so that the folks can see what we do disclose if they haven't came across it before.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And secondly, IRAP is overseen by a voluntary, I guess, advisory board of 12 people, which I believe are appointed by you, Mr. Lisk. Is that correct?
So we are not, the advisory board that supports IRAP does not have oversight. There's no fiduciary responsibility. All of that rests inside of the NRC and with the government. The purpose of the advisory board is to provide advice to IRAP around programming, program evolution, and developing new policies. So they provide advice. They do not have any oversight.
Do any of the members of the IRAP advisory board do business with SDTC currently?
To my knowledge, no.
Could you double check on that and reconfirm in writing to the clerk, please?
Absolutely.
Also, I would like to understand that I think you said, Mr. Davies, that SDTC would be rolled over by the end of Q4 this year, which for those watching ends on March 31st, to you. But the understanding is that this actually is going to be spun out of the NRC, is it not, including IRAP, to a new Crown Corporation in 2026? So you'll have very little oversight over the time of what it's doing in actuality, unlike what the minister claimed you would be doing. You have no oversight now, and then it's just going to be flipped to another Crown agency once you've got a hold of it.
So, Mr. Chair, the question is about the Canada Innovation Corporation and the plan that in 26-27 fiscal year that corporation would be put in place. There has been a law passed to create the Crown Corporation. It's just not in effect, so it's a policy question of when that happens. And the government said it'll do this in 2026-27.
Looks to me like the new SDTC is pretty much like the old SDTC, because it's being governed by a group of acting people. It'll be given to you, and then it'll be flipped out to another group. So you're an agency in the middle to another government agency with no assurance that it's going to have transparency, or that the 82%, the Auditor General reviewed 226 projects,
Question, Mr.
186
Perkins, please.
were conflicted. 186 were conflicted, 82%. Doesn't look like anything's changing to me. Just the name, perhaps where it resides.
So, Mr. Chair, I don't have responsibility as a department. ISED and Finance Canada have responsibility for the Canada Innovation Corporation and of course the policy behind that with the ministers that they support. I think the question is really to look at that statute and see what similarities or differences there are between it and the foundation that is the subject of this committee's work and study. And obviously, I think it was addressed in prior testimony here as well, is that, obviously there's questions of how to set that up and ensure that those sort of, I guess I'd say, initial conditions about governance are sound and proper. And I'd, of course, leave people to observe what they think about the Canada Innovation Corporation in that regard. I think there are differences, at least certainly one is that in the legislation there's a review committee established by the board of that Crown Corp. This isn't in place now, but is provided for, that is separate from the board members, so that decisions would be taken by a review committee rather than the board itself. That was something put in the legislation at the time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Yip, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, witnesses, for coming today. I'd like to start off by saying let's correct the record. The NRC has extensive experience in the innovation space, and IRAP is a flagship innovation program with over 75 years of experience. I believe that's what you said in your opening statement. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, yes, that is correct. NRC IRAP has been operating for over 75 years and supports close to 10,000 companies with advice and provides close to 3,000 of those companies with financial assistance on an annual basis, depending on the year. But it's a very strong part of the innovation system and quite well known among entrepreneurs as being an important service for them when they're trying to set up their businesses and see them thrive.
Going through the audits, it seems the majority of the IRAP-funded small and medium-sized businesses are profitable as a result of this funding. Can you speak to this?
So, as part of the work that we do with the firms, as we do the assessments, we try to work with the entrepreneurs to help them establish the conditions not only to undertake the research and development work, but also to be able to commercialize and sell their products. Through that mechanism, and because of that, we do track the number of all the firms and their results, and on average, they are growing at 20% or 30% per year in revenue and increasing employment on 20% per year on average. And so, to answer your question directly, generally they are profitable.
What types of firms are benefiting from this?
From the IRAP program?
Yes.
It's a very broad mandate. It works with any firm that is trying to commercialize innovation, to bring innovation into the marketplace. We have firms that we support in agri-food, in mining, ICT, and just about every sector in the Canadian economy where innovation is being used to create commercial success. It includes also clean tech firms.
So you mentioned the benefit to the economy, and the net benefit of IRAP to the Canadian economy was calculated at $16 billion, 5.3 times higher than the costs of this program. I think that's a good return on investment. Can you elaborate on that?
So I believe the numbers that you're looking at are from the latest evaluation of the IRAP program that was released a couple of years ago. And in the process of evaluation, the costs of the program are compared against the economic benefits through a model that's called a cost-benefit model, and those are the results that were reported by the consultants.
Thank you. STDC's role is also known to support Canada's clean tech firms. Can you tell us what the mission statement is in terms of the clean tech firms?
For SDTC?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't quote their mission to you. Their key role is to work with firms that are bringing innovative clean tech technologies into the marketplace for the benefit of Canadians.
So how are you going to ensure that this mission of clean tech is back at the core of what STDC does?
Well, certainly, when the program transitions over, it will operate with the same mandate to deliver the benefits to Canadians by the deployment and commercialization of clean technologies across Canada and internationally. As we stand up the program inside of IRAP, that will be maintained with the additional construct that our current programming also supports clean tech firms, but at different stages than SDTC. And so we will be able to bring forward more companies into the SDTC programming suite for them to evaluate and to be able to select the best companies.
And thank
So
you.
how-
Very quickly,
thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yip. Very
That's
good.
okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
the time did pass. Suivant encore, c'est Madame Sinclair Desgagnés.
Now, Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Concerning the way in which the NRC manages the various projects that it has under its wing, what guidelines do you have pertaining to conflicts of interest? And what did you learn from the SDTC situation?
So, Mr. Chair, the NRC has a conflict of interest policy that applies to all of our employees. It was revised in 2021 in response to our own audit committee looking for improvements in the program and the way we administer it. Be happy to provide details on the policy to the committee if that would be of interest. And I would say there's a significant program across the entire organization to ensure everyone understands what they're obliged to do, they're trained on it, and that there's due follow-up under the policy.
Merci, Monsieur Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. There is the issue of conflict of interest, but there's also the eligibility of projects. So on an internal level or external audits, is the NRC taking measures to ensure that the projects that have access to this funding be truly eligible and that we don't find ourselves in another SDTC situation?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. The situation around projects and whether they are eligible will rest with the Treasury Board terms and conditions that we receive with respect to SDTC and also for the IRAP programming. What we do is establish through our review process assurance that all projects that are brought forward do fit within those Treasury Board guidance.
Qui s'assure de ça?
And who manages this internally? Is there an internal audit team? Who really manages this? Because you have guidelines from the Treasury Board, but then they need to be followed. But we're seeing that these guidelines are not being followed. It's the case of SDTC, but also other Crown corporations.
Chair, I think the question is really answered, but there's two levels. Obviously, the staff that are involved in adjudicating the files and actually making the decisions work as a team, and they document their support to a file, and then it proceeds through the system. Then also we have follow-up work that's done to audit and undertake compliance reviews of the support we provide. ensure that it is consistent with the terms and conditions, and in very rare cases where we need to recover because of any reason that we've reviewed in the audit, we will do so. And of course, at the NRC, we also have an audit committee which can work with our internal audit function to ensure that the programs are being run in line with their terms and conditions. So there's really a multi-layer approach that's taken, but it starts really with the working level and doing the job well and documenting what you do. And then there's various checks and balances and review and internal scrutiny that is undertaken to ensure that we've done that. And we make any necessary changes and improvements that we have to over time.
Thank you very much. Suivant, up next, it's Mr. Desjardins. You have the floor for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the witnesses for being present for this and answering our questions. I do want to return on the topic of the review process, or at least the new review process and the changes that are recommended largely by the Auditor General. What aspects of the review process, in addition to your internal auditing, will enhance the eligibility review of existing projects funded by SDTC?
So, Mr. Chair, as I was sharing in response to the previous question, reviewing eligibility is really at the core of any of our examination of investments that will be made to provide funding to any business. So that will certainly apply in the case of programming that we offer for sustainable development technology purposes. It's something that staff have to do. They have to document it to make sure that it's well established. Yes.
Just so I can interrupt, specifically on the existing applications that were approved by the former board of SDTC, where there is outstanding funds, would they be subject to the former eligibility criteria to which they may have been successful under SDTC's guidelines before the suspension of funding, or would they fall under the new guidelines which may and potentially disqualify them?
So, Mr. Chair, I think, thank you for the clarification. I understand that the question is, there's a process underway now between the department, ISED, and SDTC on the eligibility of the files that they have. The file set will ultimately be transferred over to NRC. That would then carry on under our new terms and conditions. So there is work being done on eligibility, and it's not work that we're directly involved with. That's something that SDTC is doing, and then they're working with the department on it. And then we will establish terms and conditions. It'll be established, by the Treasury Board for any ongoing role of NRC IRAP and funding clients on an ongoing basis. But that work is now being undertaken right now between the department and SDTC. It doesn't involve NRC in any direct way.
Mr. Davies, do you believe that there's clear leadership in the transfer of this file? That was one of the concerns that was highlighted by the Auditor General, was that we had members, including the Deputy Minister and the board itself, unsure as their roles of their own roles and responsibilities. The way you're describing this, I get some concern that this could be a potential issue that is unresolved. Do you feel that there's the terms to which you've been asked to fulfill as the transfer of this work continues is clear? And is SDTC, or how much does SDTC's current voluntary board have much to do with the existing terms and conditions that you'll be subjected to?
So, Mr. Chair, I mean, from our point of view, the process is clear, and we're working actively with SDTC on the transition, and SDTC is working with the department on the contribution agreement that's currently in place between the department and SDTC. So we keep these things clear for a reason, because there's different parties involved, and we're obviously not involved between the department and SDTC, but equally we're very much engaged with SDTC on the planning of the transfer, because we have to make sure we hit our milestones and do this in a seamless fashion. There's a lot of work involved. I wouldn't underestimate that, and of course other witnesses have spoken about the work that's being undertaken as we speak on that.
Thank you very much. That is the time. You will have one last opportunity in the next round. Appreciate that back and forth. Mr. Perkins, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So along the same lines, the Auditor General, as you know, tabled with this committee further to her audit that $390 million of taxpayer money has been either voted on in a conflict of interest and include $58 million that was given outside of the limits of the contribution agreements or parameters of it, you're going to receive this pile of stuff within 4 to 6 months. And I have no confidence that the minister, Liberal Minister of Industry, or his department who screwed all this up will get that $390 million back. Will you commit that if they have not gotten it back, you will follow the Auditor General's report and the comments of the Deputy Minister that this money needs to be recovered and go after that money?
Mr. Chair, I think the question of recovery and the question of how that will be addressed is being established in the transition process. What I assume is that the files we receive will be in good standing. There'll be files that have standing under the contribution agreement that are eligible, and that we can carry on our work to provide any ongoing funding that might be well required for those files or to work with those clients. That's the assumption I make.
What does good standing mean? That the money's been recovered and you don't have to do any of the work? Because NRC had a scandal in the Chrétien government where employees were taking kickbacks on grants, and NRC had to get that money back. So you do have experience, or the NRC does have experience of trying to recover inappropriate money. More experience than, unfortunately, than the department does. So will you commit that you will get it? Because good standing doesn't mean anything to me.
Mr. Chair, good standing, as I'm defining it, is that they would be eligible, files that are eligible under the program. Obviously, I can say that to the extent that we have a legal role to recover any funds due to the Crown, then, obviously that's something we would follow up on because it would be, within our authority to do so. As we do now, if we ever have funds that are owing as a consequence of programs that we already run. So that's the framework that will apply.
Will you ensure that the employees, you talked about employee offers, the employees that were involved in putting this forward, including the current acting president who fast-tracked the Visharian Center proposal through SDTC and were involved in this Liberal cover-up corruption, and the Liberals are trying to cover it up, are not offered new positions since they were involved in helping this happen already, as well as any of those corrupt directors that are there.
Mr. Chair, our approach with SDC employees is that we'll be working with the vast majority of employees to provide offers, and the senior executives, the interim board are working with the senior executives on their employment as it is now, and you could address those questions to the interim board as to their relationship with the most senior employees in SDTC.
And will you make any IRAP advisory board member resign who is currently involved with SDTC in order to ensure we don't have the same level of corruption happen under your leadership that's happened under the Liberal leadership of Minister Champagne, that does not continue?
So, Mr. Chair, as I believe my colleague had mentioned, our current IRAP advisory board, to our knowledge, doesn't have anyone that's involved in this topic or circumstances.
I asked if they do, will you make sure they're off the board?
Mr. Chair, we want all of our advisory committee members to be people that, obviously are there and serve in the public trust and maintain the confidence on an ongoing basis.
Means not double dipping like 9 directors the Auditor General identified.
Okay. Ms. Bradford, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. ISED published a report in October 2023 with suggestions and an action plan that SDTC had to implement by December 2023. Has this action plan been implemented, and are there any updates?
Question is obviously responsibility of ISED and follow-up, and so I know there has been a discussion at the committee with the Deputy Minister of the department, and obviously it's for ISED to provide an accounting to the committee as to its actions and follow-up on that action plan that was shared with the public. The NRC is obviously working in collaboration with ISED and with SDTC on the transition process that we've described today, and to ensure that it's done on a timely basis and that we can provide some stability for the stakeholders that work with SDTC, and obviously for the employees as well involved.
The government announced this major programming transition back in June. Are the timelines you're currently working with usual practice for this type of transition?
Mr. Chair, as I said in my opening comments, we're endeavoring to get this work done within a year. There's a lot to do, and for all the reasons that are clear in the conversation that's taken place today, to look at the files and be able to prepare them to transfer to us, and then for us to prepare the systems and obviously our offer to employees to carry on the programming. And we're hoping to do this hopefully earlier than that year, but obviously we're endeavoring to meet that commitment to Canadians, and it's what's expected of us to get this transition underway and carry it out as fast as we possibly can.
So given that it's no longer an arm's-length organization, can you speak to how exactly SDTC is now subject to the FAA, as is customary for all government agencies, and what are the implications of this?
So, Mr. Chair, to be helpful, but you'd probably best ask this of SDTC or ISED to have a specific answer. But I think because of the SDTC being established under its own legislation set up as a foundation, I'm not certain whether the Financial Administration Act directly applies to SDTC and its activities, but that would be something that probably is best addressed to experts in the department that could talk about that. I certainly know the Financial Administration Act does apply to the National Research Council.
And how are you going to ensure that the mission of clean tech is back at the core of what SDTC does and the potential it has to do good for Canada's clean tech firms and industry who need its support?
So, Mr. Chair, I'd say first the strategic plan of the National Research Council has among its priorities climate and sustainability, and in fact it has a lot to do with research work we do and also support for innovation that is provided through NRC IRAP. Further, the programming that we'll be able to provide for sustainable technology will move to the NRC IRAP organization and with the appropriate staff that can make sure that we deliver that, taking into account the economic goals and objectives of the program, but also the sustainability objectives that are now and have been reviewed by SDTC in its consideration of files, and we'll obviously bring those employees and expertise over to NRC IRAP to continue that work.
Okay, thank you. Well, I know that many of the small and medium businesses would not be able to survive without these funds and incur the capital outlay to transition to green tech. So hopefully you'll be able to ensure that that continues. I have no further questions. I want to thank you very much for attending today and answering all these multiple questions so fully. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Bradford. In a moment, I'm just going to suspend for a few minutes. In the meantime, I will thank the witnesses for coming in today, for answering our questions to the best of your ability. I know there was some requests for information. If you could send that through to the clerk. When I know some of them were, there was a timeline on one that Mr. Desjardins requested. We will look for that information when it is available, please. And you're excused. Thank you very much. We will return in about 5 minutes to pick up Mr. Perkins' motion.